Does injustice truly fuel determination, or does it break the spirit? Share your stories of resilience or defeat. The fluorescent lights of the high school auditorium buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the sea of faces. Jada Miller stood center stage, heart hammering against her ribs, palms slick despite the practiced grip on her notes. A microphone stood before her, its cold metal microphone fragile under the weight of her voice's impending declaration. She inhaled deeply, channeling the cadence of Martin Luther King Jr. Her voice steady, rising with a quiet power born from generations of struggle. "I have a dream," she began, each word reverberating through the hushed room like a heartbeat. Her eyes scanned the audience, seeking understanding beneath the sea of indifferent stares and whispered judgments. A hopeful fire flickered within her, ignited by the legacy of courage etched deep in her veins. But the fragile moment shattered abruptly. Sneering laughter erupted from a cluster near the back, led by Emma, the queen bee of a privileged circle. "Hey, Jada, what's the matter? Lost your script or just your place?" Emma's voice sliced through the room, sharp and mocking. The laughter swelled, a wave of public derision crashing over Jada's bare shoulders. Faces glazed with smirks and cold amusement. Whispers morphed into clear taunts. Jada's hands tightened around her notes. Her voice wavered but held as she pushed forward. "You think this is funny?" she called, voice quieter now, the fire flickering but unextinguished. But Emma's group, faces painted with cruel delight, drowned her out, their jeers mingling with the unforgiving fluorescent glare. A sharp tap on the microphone snapped across the stage, a warning from the teacher, but it did nothing to quell the storm of cruelty. Jada's heart sank as isolation settled like a tangible weight. The auditorium felt colder, shadows deeper, every amused glance and whispered slur etching itself into her skin like an indelible mark. Suddenly, a mirror on the stage part of the set, unremarked upon until now, caught the harsh light and reflected her fractured image back. A young black woman, natural curls pulled into a bun, face luminous with quiet strength yet etched with vulnerability. The cracked surface symbolized the fragile reality she inhabited, visible yet unseen, strong yet assaulted by the world around her. Her breath hitched. The room's clamor dimmed to a distant roar, focusing inward. Each beat felt louder over the thundering silence as all eyes bore into her, dissecting, condemning, dismissing. Yet beneath the shame, a stubborn pulse of determination throbbed, a spark shielding a heart unbroken. Emma's laughter echoed one last time before fading into the backdrop as the assembly began to stir, some turning away, others exchanging uneasy glances. The spotlight dimmed. The moment hung suspended, a breath held between agony and promise. Jada stepped back from the microphone, a shadow overlaying her radiant green eyes, her lips pressed into a tentative line. The camera lingered on her silhouette, framed by the cold light, the mirror reflecting the resilient soul beneath the surface, silent but defiant. In the quiet aftermath, the auditorium seemed suspended in time, the oppressive weight of rejection setting the stage for a journey not yet begun but already fiercely claimed in the fire of her spirit. The pale light of late afternoon filtered through the blinds, casting fractured shadows across Jada Miller's bedroom walls, a chaotic tapestry of narratives she struggled to piece together within herself. The room was a mosaic of thrifted garments, notebooks bursting with scribbled poems and sketches, and the soft hum of distant city life filtered in through the cracked window. Yet the sanctuary felt fragile, brittle, a thin veil stretched taut over a chasm of silent turmoil. Jada's emerald eyes, rimmed with unwelcome moisture, fixed on the cracked mirror propped against the dresser. The reflection's vulnerability held echoes of bold words once spoken with unyielding fire, now clouded by the cold sting of rejection. Her natural curls, usually defiant and artfully uncontrolled, fell limp against the collar of her sweatshirt, a stark contrast to the spirited girl who had stepped onto that stage mere hours before. Time seemed to dilate, the weight of unseen gazes pressing inward until the very air felt thick, each breath a silent struggle against engulfing shame. A faint pulse echoed from within her chest, a heartbeat fractured yet unextinguished amid the swirling tide of self-doubt. Her fingers brushed absent-mindedly over a handmade bracelet, the vibrant colors a testament to creativity born from resistance. With a lingering swallow, she traced the lines of the worn fabric, absorbing the tactile reminder of who she was beneath the veil of rejection. Suddenly, the distant chime of the school bell carried on the brise reminder of a world that moved inexorably onward, often indifferent to those who faltered within its tide. Yet it whispered also of possibilities, uncharted and waiting. A sudden knock at the door startled Hera's soft, tentative rap. Her mother's voice came through, warm yet concerned, carrying a gentle invitation to break the walls of solitude. But Jada only shook her head, managing a fragile whisper, "Not now." Alone again, the room's shadows lengthened, their silent swirl reflecting the deepening tempest within. She rose slowly, moving to the window pane, where the city sighed beneath the amber hues of street lamps flickering to life. Her gaze lingered on the mirrored glass, the reflection doubling the girl she was, and the woman she yearned to become. The broken chains of prejudice felt heavier than ever, yet somewhere beneath the weight, a flame flickered, a whisper, a breath, a glimmer ready to be fed. Jada's lips parted in a silent vow, barely audible, "This isn't the end." The camera held on the fragile curve of resolve knitting across her face as the night deepened, each shadow slowly yielding to the faint glow of dawn's first light, a subtle promise that even within the darkest trials, strength can take root and rise. The afternoon sun dipped low beyond the city skyline, its last rays filtering through the smudged windows of the modest apartment where Jada Miller cradled a small, weathered Booker mother's diary. The soft rustle of pages brushing against skin filled the quiet room like whispered voices from another time. Dust motes suspended in golden beams of light, each a tiny fragment of memory that shimmered in the air. Jada's fingers trembled as she carefully opened the delicate book, the leather cover cracked yet resolute, much like the spirit contained within. Her emerald eyes drank in the handwritten words. The elegant script spoke of struggle and courage, of a fierce determination to fight against the rising tide of injustice that sought to silence voices like theirs. Each line unfolded a tapestry of resilience, stories of marches, speeches in the face of scorn, and quiet acts of rebellion against a world intent on marginalization. The diary revealed not just a mother, but a warrior whose footsteps she was destined to follow, someone who wielded words like weapons and love like armor. The room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the dim light glowing warmer as Jada's breath caught and her heart quickened. Through the fading evening light, the mirror across the room reflected her image not as a fractured girl cast down by ridicule, but as a beacon of potential, a mirror of unbroken strength. Outside, the city's hum throbbed faintly, life swirling beyond the fragile wall sand. Jada felt a stirring beneath the weight of shame and solitude. The echoes of taunts and laughter from the auditorium were distant now, overshadowed by the stirring legacy that pulsed within her veins. A delicate chain slipped free from the pages, revealing a small, silver pendant engraved with intertwined chains, broken and intertwined, a symbol of liberation. The pendant caught the last light of day, casting a soft glow that danced over Jada's determined eyes. It was more than jewelry. It was a promise etched in silver of freedom, of justice, of reclaiming voice. Her lips curled at the corners, a flicker of a smile illuminating the shadows gathering in the room. The fire that had been dimmed by mockery and doubt now kindled anew, fragile but persistent. With deliberate calm, she closed the diary, the weight of inherited courage settling into her hands like an unspoken vow. The mirror before her no longer fractured her image, it reflected a resolve unyielding and fierce. The camera held steady on the swinging pendant, its glow a silent heartbeat in the encroaching dark, a spark destined to ignite the path ahead. Jada turned from the mirror, her silhouette framed by the growing twilight outside, each step echoing purpose and awakening. The journey was beginning not in victory, but in the gathering of strength, as the quiet storm of change prepared to rise. The morning light sliced through the thin cracks of the classroom blinds, casting long, stripy shadows that danced with the dust motes swirling lazily in the air. Jada Miller sat at her desk, heart thudding in her chest, the weight of yesterday's humiliation still pressing, but beneath it, a stir of defiance flickered uncertainly. The worn pages of her mother's diary rested open on the scarred desktop, each sentence a whispered inheritance echoing courage from generations past. The cool air from the cracked window barely stirred the curls pinned loosely atop Jada's head, yet the silence around her was tatters of anticipation. The usually bustling classroom seemed hushed, the distant murmurs of other students just out of earshot like the quiet before a storm. She shifted in her seat, the fabric of her thrifted jacket catching the frail light, symbolizing the patchwork of strength and vulnerability she wore. Her fingers brushed across the diary, a tactile connection to the fierce woman who had walked trails of resistance and sacrifice. The words mirrored not just history but a blueprint for battle she hadn't realized she'd inherited. The idea was intoxicating yet terrifying, pushing her from the shadows of shame into the uncertain dawn of reclaiming voice. Outside the window, a stray leaf fell, twisting in the breeze, tumbling like a small liberation through the cold, gray air. The spacing between breaths felt charged with possibility and doubt. Jada caught a brief glance in the hallway mirror, a fractured reflection, the same natural curls and bright eyes now underscored by lines of quiet resolve. As the bell signaled the start of the new period, Jada folded the diary closed slowly, the sound sharp amidst the lingering silence. She stood, the creak of her shoes on the linoleum an echo of her awakening. Near the lockers, she found allies, students whose eyes held shadows of their own battles with judgment and exclusion. Their silent nods were the first small, fragile victories for a burgeoning circle of strength. "I'm tired of hiding," Jada whispered to herself, voice barely rising above the rustle of locker doors closing. Nearby, distant laughter, sharp, cutting, reminded her that the path ahead was jagged. Emma and her clique moved through the hall like predators, eyes flicking with disdain, steps punctuated by cruel smirks. But this time, Jada met their gaze steadily, the fire in her chest kindling into something fierce. In the cafeteria's noisy haze of clattering trays and cousin conversations, Jada stood beside her new allies. Their shared stories, whispers of kindred struggles, and tentative solidarity wove a tapestry fragile but real beneath the tumult. A temporary haven amid chaos, but the undercurrent of tension pulsed strong, the looming threat of betrayal, the constant pull of fear, the uncertainty of her own resolve. As the afternoon shadows lengthened and warmed into the soft hues of twilight, Jada's gaze lingered on the diary once more, its binding worn but unbroken, a symbol of her own journey just beginning. But at the edge of her vision, beyond the school's worn brick walls, the watchful presence of Emma's group loomed, a lurking storm about to test every flicker of newfound courage. The scene faded as the last light kissed the horizon, leaving the air thick with promise and an unspoken question. How far would she rise before the wind sought to break her? The weight of the day pressed down on Jada as she navigated the narrow hallways of her high school, hallways that seemed to close in tighter with each whispered word and sideways glance. The morning sun outside did little to warm the cold undercurrents that twisted through the buzzing corridors where laughter often masked barbs sharper than any knife. Her group of ally Seach, battered by prejudice yet bound by quiet solidarity, walked beside her, a fragile shield against the gathering storm. In the locker-lined halls, Emma's presence loomed like a tempest just beyond the horizon, her smile both invitation and threat. The privileged queen of this dominion, her eyes glinting with calculated disdain, prowled with her retinue, a carefully sculpted fortress of social power. Subtle gestures and pointed comments were weapons Emma wielded expertly, sowing doubt within the fragile alliances Jada had nurtured. At lunch, the vibrant clatter of trays and chatter filled the air, but beneath the easy camaraderie lay shifting currents. Jada felt the sting of whispered rumors, smiles exchanged behind her back, the barbed questions veiled in casual tones. Even some once trusted friends now hesitated, their loyalties caught on a knife's edge. The burden of leadership, unchosen yet embraced, threatened to fracture beneath the pressure. A quiet confrontation unfolded in the courtyards just beyond the classroom windows. "You're moving too fast," whispered one of Jada's newer allies, doubt coloring her voice. "Not everyone is ready to stand with you. Some fears run too deep." Jada's reply was soft but resolute. "Change isn't comfortable," she said, eyes locked with conviction. "But the cost of silence is far worse." Night fell, and with it came the cold laboratory of introspection. Alone in her cramped bedroom, Jada sat beneath the muted glow of a bedside lamp, the pages of her mother's diary spread before her, a flickering sanctuary of strength. The words revealed not only defiance but the merciless price of standing against the tide. She traced the ink with trembling fingers, absorbing lessons wrought of fire and tears. Beneath the window, rain began to drum a relentless rhythm echoing her tumultuous emotions. In this solitude, her doubts surged unbidden, shadows casting long questions. Could she really break the cycle set before her? Would the fragile flame she guarded be snuffed out by the guileful schemes of Emma and her group? Yet amid the storm's cold fury, a subtle resilience began to kindle small victory in a whispered promise, a shared smile from an unlikely peer, the slow gathering of a resistance as much internal as external. The camera followed Jada as she rose, the rain tracing luminous rivers down the pane, mirroring tears she refused to shed. Clutching the diary to her chest, she whispered into the dark, "I won't give up." But as the night deepened, so did the threats unseen. Emma's plan, veiled in shadows and calculated cruelty, tightened its grip, threatening not only Jada's fragile alliances but the very essence of her quest for justice. The screen faded slowly, the image of Jada standing firm beneath the dim glow of the lamp, fragmented mirrors reflecting the fractured yet unyielding spirit of a girl daring to rewrite her story in a world reluctant to change. The night had thickened over the school like an oppressive shroud, cloaking the sharp edges of the day's battles in deep shadows and restless silence. Jada sat alone on the rickety wooden bench beneath the flickering street lamp outside the school's worn brick facade, the cool October air curling around her like a frigid embrace. The weight of the day's confrontations settled heavy on her shoulders, the ache of fractured trust and whispered betrayals cutting deeper than any ridicule she had endured. Her eyes, usually vibrant with defiant light, now shimmered glassy with the beginning crest of tears, mirroring the cold glow of the cracked pavement beneath her feet. The necklace her mother once wore, a delicate silver chain broken and mended with purpose, rested in her hand, reminding her that resilience was often forged in pain. Earlier, the classroom had erupted with tension, her carefully nurtured circle fraying beneath the relentless machinations of Emma's rancor. Alliances once believed steady cracked under pressure, small acts of doubt whispered through tight-knit groups, seeded by insidious lies that twisted the truth like the tangled curls settling on Jada's brow. In the midst of it, an unexpected ally emerged: Tyler, a classmate whose quiet demeanor belied a sharp awareness of the injustices woven through their school. His whispered encouragements were a fragile lifeline thrown across the growing chasm of isolation. "They can't break you," he said, voice low but steady, eyes burning with an intensity that echoed her own smoldering anger and hope. "You're more than what they want you to believe." But even as this spark kindled, the cost was brutal. Rumors began to ripple like venom through the halls, false accusations that threatened to strip Jada of her place on the debate team, the spotlight where she had fought so hard to be seen. The betrayal stung sharpest there, where passion met purpose, where her intellect was weaponized against her. Her chest tightened, a storm of frustration and heartbreak pooling behind clenched teeth. The mirror in the school bathroom reflected a face she barely recognized, fierce yet fragile, scarred yet unyielding. She traced the outline of her own reflection, a young woman caught between worlds, between the desire to conform and the need to be true to herself. "Why does standing up come with so much loss?" she whispered into the cracked glass, the answer caught in the cold echo of her own breath. Then, as if fate itself conspired to unveil secrets that could shift the tides, the diary slipped from her backpack, pages fluttering open to reveal a folded, yellowed letter, words penned in the steady hand of her mother. The letter spoke of courage not only as defiance but as love, not as rebellion alone, but as an unbreakable faith in justice. The truth of her mother's activism illuminated a path forged through shadows and resistance and inheritance richer than any spoken accolade. It was a revelation that cut through the despair like a shaft of light, promising redemption and a reclaiming of power long denied. With trembling fingers, Jada clutched the letter close, a fragile tether in the darkness. Her breath steadied, eyes sharpening with the clarity of purpose that only truth can birth. Behind the veil of night, the farthest lights of the school flickered, silent witnesses to a fight far from over. The camera lingered on Jada's determined silhouette as she rose, the broken chains motif engraved on the necklace gleaming faintly beneath the street lamp's glow, a promise of liberation that awaited beyond the storm. The screen faded with the echo of distant footsteps, heralding the onset of trials yet to come, and a question hanging heavy in the air. Will courage prevail beneath crushing shadows, or will the darkness claim another victim? The relentless rain hammered the cracked pavement outside the school, blurring the harsh reflections of flickering streetlights and throwing streaks of cold silver over Jada Miller's bowed head. She sat on the cold metal bench beneath the stark glow of a lone lamppost, the night air heavy and thick, seeped in the bitter chill of betrayal. The deserted courtyard was silent but for the steady pulse of the rain, an unyielding symphony that seemed to swallow the world whole. Her sweatshirt, threadbare in places and damp from the mist, clung to her trembling form as the faint hum of distant cars grew faint and vanished, a fading heartbeat of a world that felt increasingly distant. Around her, shadows pooled thick, swallowing the path back to the warmth and light of belonging she had chased so fervently. In her palm, the fractured promise of the debate team badge symbol once so cherished felt impossibly heavy. It was a relic of triumphs prematurely stolen, a mark erased by whispered lies spread deftly by Emma and her clique. Each false rumor was a blade, cutting the only place she'd begun to carve out for herself in the cold social maze. Her breath came shallow, frost forming fragile patterns in the air with each exhale. The world felt muted, colors leaching into shades of gray and black. The vibrant rhythm of fight and hope that had defined her heartbeat now stumbled, faltered, a flicker at the edge of extinguishing. Her gaze drifted skyward, a scarred glass ceiling veiled by roiling clouds, noise cancelling the distant stars. A solitary tear traced a cold, silent path down the curve of her cheek, tracing the fragile line between hope and surrender. Voices flickered in her memory, the warmth of fleeting alliances, the whispered promises of solidarity, now diminished beneath a tide of doubt and division. She pressed her hand against the rough metal of the bench, grounding herself in the raw, aching loneliness of exile within her own community. The broken chain symbol, once a quiet talisman of liberation, gleamed faintly on her necklace, a cruel reminder of the weight she carried alone, burdened not only by the world's prejudice but the painful fractures within her circle. Time slipped, the seconds folding into the endless dark as she cradled hope's fragile heartbeat beneath her ribsaw, flicker barely visible, yet stubbornly alive. In her silence, she whispered the faintest of mantras, a fragile bulwark against oblivion: I am still here. And beneath the indifferent rain, beneath the echoing void of abandonment, that singular, resolute breath swelled her sole declaration in a world intent on silence. The camera held on her bowed figure, framed by the relentless rain and the unforgiving night, a portrait of raw, unfiltered humanity on the edge of unraveling. Darkness pressed heavily against the cold walls of the empty room where Jada sat curled into herself, the only light the faint flicker from a dying candle struggling to hold onto its slender flame. The air was thick and stale, soaked in silence, the kind of silence that feels like a weight pressing into the bones, robbing the breath and dulling the senses. Every small noise in the house was swallowed by the vast emptiness, echoing faintly and then falling away into nothing. Jada's gaze was fixed downward, lost in the hastily scrawled notes of her mother's diary resting on the worn wooden floor beside her. Her hands trembled slightly, but it was not from the chill that wound around the room like a ghost. It was the tremor of grief, raw and unyielding. The words once brought hope, now they felt like bittersweet echoes of a promise she feared she could not fulfill. Outside, a cold wind rattled the window frame, carrying with it the ghostly whisper of leaves scraping against broken glass. The world beyond was a blur of shadows dancing against the moonlight, a world both familiar and alien existing without her. She felt hollow, as though something vital had been carved away, leaving a void too vast to fill. The determination that had burned bright in her heart flickered low, suffocated beneath waves of loneliness and despair. Her reflection in the cracked mirror across the room stared back at her, a fractured image, a mosaic of strength shattered by relentless cruelty. Her voice was bare, a whisper swallowed before it left her lips. "Why? Why does it hurt so much?" The only reply was the haunting silence, a sigh of wind slipping through the cracks. She reached out to the broken necklace lying next to the diarrhea symbol of liberation, once, now tangled and tarnished, its chain split, its promise undone. Jada's fingers closed weakly around the cold metal, a futile grasp at something whole that no longer existed. The fragile light caught on a tiny, shattered broken chain reflecting her broken spirit. The weight of invisible burdens pressed down, her shoulders sagging with the unbearable ache of isolation. In the darkness, shadows seemed to close in as the room grew colder, the broken glass of the pendant catching the candlelight in fractured glimmers, mocking shards of what might have been. Her breath slowed as tears fell silent, tracing icy paths down her cheeks, vanishing into the hollow emptiness. Time stretched into a void, each moment a slow collapse into desolation. The world felt distant, the gentle warmth of friendship and hope replaced by biting chill and the heavy shroud of invisibility. Her body curled tighter, seeking refuge in motionless retreat. The camera lingered on Jada's fragile silhouette against the stark backdrop, her figure consumed by the shadowed silence, poised at the threshold of surrender. The candle sputtered its last flicker, extinguishing softly, plunging the room into a dark void. And in that profound stillness, the scene held no sound, no movement, only the lingering echo of a spirit on the verge of breaking but not yet broken entirely. The chilly air inside the empty classroom was thick with silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock marking the relentless passage of time. Jada sat alone at her usual desk, slumped, her fingers absently tracing the worn edges of the crumpled pages of her mother's diary, now her most treasured possession and a reminder of the courage she had forgotten. Outside the window, dusk wrapped the schoolyard in muted blues and grays, shadows long and indifferent. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead cast a pale glow that did nothing to warm the cold sinking into her bones. Her reflection in the glass wasn't just the young woman whose voice had once rung with conviction, it now revealed someone fractured, stripped bare by the betrayals and loneliness that had wrapped around her like chains. The fragile symbol of broken links, the necklace, rested silently against her collarbone, its cold weight a quiet reminder that liberation was still just out of reach. Jada's breath fogged the window briefly, the mist swirling and dissolving, much like the fleeting sense of belonging she once dared to grasp. Her lips parted into a whisper, barely audible. "Am I enough?" From the shadows, a soft sound interrupted the stillness, a gentle tap against the locker next to hers. Startled, she turned to find a small, folded note slipped under the door. The paper was plain, unadorned, but its presence was anything but. Hands trembling, she unfolded it, revealing a single line written carefully, "Your voice is not alone." The words were a fragile lifeline thrown across a sea of doubt and despair. The simple message, imbued with unseen support, kindled a flicker of warmth deep within her chest, a fragile spark waiting to ignite. A faint memory stirred a glimpse of her mother's steady gaze, her resolute words echoing through time as a beacon. Courage is not absence of fear but the triumph over it. The camera lingered on the delicate necklace, reflecting the last glimmers of twilight, each sparkle a symbol of ongoing resistance and the promise of awakening strength. Jada drew a slow, steadying breath, the corners of her mouth lifting into a tentative, resolute smile. The room's coldness remained, but within her, a quiet flame had been rekindled. The scene held a silent promise hanging delicately in the suspended air that even in the depths of despair, hope's faint pulse could not be extinguished. As the screen faded, it left the echo of a courageous heart poised at the threshold of renewal and the storm that lay ahead. The auditorium was thick with an almost tangible silence, broken only by the faint rustle of paper and the cautious shifting of feet. Jada Miller stood at the podium, bathed in the soft glow of warm stage lights that seemed to seep into her very bones. Her heart hammered in her chest, a drumbeat echoing her resolve. The crowd, once a sea of whispers and sneers, was now a hushed witness to her reclaiming voice. She looked out over the assembly, eyes steady, capturing the quiet anticipation that had been building for days, the tentative hope that she could pivot from despair to power. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutching her notes, yet her voice emerged with clarity, wrapping around each listener like a lifeline. When shadows fall hardest, the light inside us flickers brightest, she began, her voice resonating with the echoes of past struggles and newfound strength. We are more than the words they say, more than the judgments cast by those too afraid to see our truth. Her words, imbued with heartfelt sincerity, resonated across the space, stirring a ripple of reflection among her peers. The cold hue of the room softened as the audience's eyes met hers, some hesitant, others moved, seeing in her not just a student but a symbol of resilience. She felt a faint warmth uncoil within her, a delicate hope blooming in the wake of storm and silence. Behind the fearful veneer of her nervous exterior, a kernel of conviction had begun to sprout, fueled by whispered encouragement from a secret supporter she had not yet recognized. A flicker of courage ignited, her posture straightening as she pressed on, unveiling truths with a newfound ferocity. I stand here not as a victim of prejudice, she declared, but as a voice breaking free from chains of silence. Every lie they spun fuels my fight, every sneer, every smirk, is only the flame I carry to light our way. Her words hung in the air, heavy with intent, a stark contrast to the cold exterior of the space. The shadows that had once cloaked her confidence receded just enough to let her face shine with the tentative glow of hope and purpose. As her speech drew to a close, the room seemed to breathe anew. The silence was no longer oppressive but deliberate, filled with the silent acknowledgement that change stirred quietly, fragile yet unstoppable. Her gaze lingered on the faces in the crowd, finding in some a mirror of her own courage, in others a flicker of awakening. A moment of shared understanding blossomed in unspoken promise that her struggles were the seedlings of something greater, a movement rooted in resilience. The scene faded with Jada stepping down from the podium, the faint glow of dawn creeping into the sanctuary of resolve, proof that even the darkest nights could spark the first rays of dawn. The auditorium buzzed with the low hum of anticipation, now charged with energy. Jada Miller stood at the center of the stage, her figure bathed in a soft, warm glow that cut sharply through the cold hues still lingering on the edges of her consciousness. Her eyes, once clouded with doubt and fear, now shone with a fierce clarity, reflecting a hard-won resolve. Her fingers trembled slightly as she grasped the microphone, but it was her heart that truly held the weight of her words. She looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, many strangers, each one a witness to a moment that teetered on the edge of history. Her voice broke the silence, steady and unwavering. We are more than the whispers of hate that seek to silence us, she declared, her words echoing powerfully, reverberating through the silent space like a thunderclap of truth. Our identities are our strength, not their prejudices. Our voices cannot be muted by lies or fear. A hush fell over the room, the kind of silence that grips the soul, waiting, listening. The cold shimmer of doubt and prejudice in the air seemed to recede, replaced by a bloom of warm conviction radiating from her words. Her eyes scanned the crowd, catching glimpses of younger students, teachers, even some of her doubters. Each of them, a fragment of a vast tapestry of transformation, along with the hesitant glances of those beginning to see her not as a threat but as a leader. Behind her, Unseen but felt, the ghost of her mother's legacy flickered like a guiding flame. The whispered stories of resistance, of justice, of a woman who stood unbreakable in the face of overwhelming hatred. Jada's voice grew stronger, rippling with authenticity and purpose. This is our moment to rewrite the story, to turn the page from fear to hope, from silence to revolution. The light in the room shifted, warm tones washing over cold shadows, casting a dawn of possibility. The moment, fragile yet unbreakable, felt like a sunrise after a long, dark night. A symbolic breaking of chains echoed in the very air, invisible but undeniable, as she let her words settle into the hearts of her listeners. A single steadfast hand raised in the audience, followed by another, then another's, spontaneous and fearless, a chorus of unity swelling gradually into a crescendo of applause. The sound built a rising tide of affirmation and awakening a recognition that the old ways, the silences, and the lies could no longer prevail. Her hand lifted in quiet defiance, her gaze fierce yet compassionate, as if to say, "I am here, and I am not afraid." The crowd responded in a wave of applause, their cheers cutting through the remaining chills of doubt, setting the stage for what was to come. The scene lingered on Jada's face, their expression a tapestry of hope and fierce determination, a beacon for a new chapter about to unfold. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the vast room illuminated by a newfound light, an emblem of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. The auditorium was bathed in a warm, golden hue, the kind of light that heralds new beginnings and ignites hope. Jada Miller stood at the center of the stage, her posture composed yet emanating a quiet strength that refused to be dimmed by past betrayals. Her face, lit by the gentle glow of the spotlight, carried the serenity of a person who had finally found her voice, a voice forged in the crucible of pain, yet tempered by unwavering resolve. She gazed across the growing crowd, her eyes shimmering with a fierce conviction that had been earned, not given. The chaos and despair of days past had receded, replaced by a luminous clarity. The weight of false accusations, the scars of betrayal from friends turned foes, all of it was now a dark memory fading into insignificance. Her hand lifted, holding tightly the faint outline of her mother's legacy, a tiny, worn pendant that had been hidden away for years, a symbol of silent rebellion and enduring love. The chains of prejudice, once seemingly unbreakable, loosened in the face of truth and courage. The audience, inspired by her unwavering stance, moved as one, their eyes glistening with newfound understanding. Today, Jada began softly, her voice echoing with a steadfast power, we rise beyond the lies fed to us, beyond the systemic silence imposed by those who seek to hide our truth. Our stories matter. Our voices matter. We are more than the labels placed upon us by fear and prejudice. Her words, deliberate and heartfelt, struck a chord deep within those listening, igniting a collective awakening. A ripple of applause swelled, growing into an unstoppable wave of recognition that rippled across the room. The chains that bound her and many others began to crack and fall, symbolizing a liberation from the darkness of marginalization. Her gaze softened as she saw her fellow students, some hesitant, others emboldened, all beginning to embrace the difficult truth. Change is a collective journey, sustained by hope and unwavering resolve. Behind her, the once threatening shadows receded, replaced by the emerging dawn of justice, a symbol of resilience reborn from the ashes of despair. The camera lingered on her calm, unwavering face, a portrait of triumph, a testament to what can be achieved when fear is replaced by purpose. As the audience erupted into applause, Jada's heart swelled with an unspoken vow. She was no longer a girl hiding behind her dreams. She was a beacon of resistance, a living proof that even amidst darkness, the human spirit could forge its own dawn. The scene faded with her standing tall, her silhouette against the brightening horizon, a silent promise of continued strength and justice in the days to come. The golden hues of dawn spilled softly over the horizon, bathing the quiet cemetery in a gentle, almost sacred light. Jada Miller stood alone before her mother's grave, her figure a silhouette against the sprawling sky, serene yet resolute. Her hands, once trembling with doubt, now rested calmly atop a simple crown of wildflowers, the delicate petals a testament to resilience and renewal. The breeze whispered through the trees, carrying a faint scent of earth and hope. The silence around her was thick with unspoken truths, memories of pain, triumph, betrayal, and healing, all woven seamlessly into her own story. For each act of cruelty she had endured, she now saw the faint gleam of strength that had guided her through the darkness. Her gaze lingered on the carved epitaph, her mother's words, inscribed in silent reverence. Strength without is nothing. Love without courage is merely existence. The words echoed anew in her mind, a quiet reminder that her journey was never just about justice, but about becoming whole. Jada brushed her fingers gently across the rough stone, tracing the names, the time-worn letters that told of generations fighting unseen battles against prejudice. A tear slipped free, glistening in the dawn's light, yet it was an act of release, not of despair. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cool, fresh air. Each inhale an affirmation of resilience, each exhale a letting go. Behind her, the world stirred quietly, the long shadows retreating as the sun climbed higher, lighting everything with tender warmth. The scars of her past, once dark and jagged, now shimmered softly like broken glass smoothed by time, reflections of a soul forged in fire. The mirror she often avoided now held only the calm visage of her future, an image shaped by courage, truth, and love. In the stillness, her heart fluttered with a quiet, unshakable peace. The storm within had calmed, leaving behind a landscape of gentle acceptance. The chains of prejudice and fear had been shattered, replaced by a sense of belonging and understanding that her legacy was not only in the past but embedded within her every step forward. As the sun's first rays kissed the earth, Jada turned slowly, her silhouette bathed in a soft glow, walking away from the grave. Her footsteps were deliberate but light, each one a symbol of growth, of finally reclaiming her story, piece by piece. The camera lingered on her, a figure of quiet triumph amidst the swirling dawn. The scene faded into a tranquil tableau, figure dissolving into the vast, awakening landscape, an eternal testament that even in the deepest grief, hope quietly blooms, ready to carry her onward. The evening sky stretched wide, painted in hues of deep amber and gentle purple as Jada Miller stood silently before her mother's grave, the soft earth crumbling beneath her fingers. The setting sun cast a warm, forgiving glow over the quiet plot, illuminating her figure with a gentle light, a stark contrast to the darkness she had endured. Her eyes, once alight with rebellion and fury, now carried a tranquil calm, each breath an unspoken testament to grace and acceptance. She placed the crown of flowers, her mother's favorite, gently on the marble headstone, a fragile yet powerful symbol of her journey from pain to peace. The floral arrangement was simple but profound, each bloom whispering silent stories of resilience, hope, and love that refused to fade. The breeze stirred softly, caressing her curls and stirring the delicate remnants of tears that shimmered briefly in the fading light. In this sacred moment of quiet reflection, the shadows of her past seemed to melt into the horizon, replaced by a luminous clarity. Her hands clasped the earth softly, grounding herself in the truths she had fought so hard to uncover, not just about her past, but about her strength, her purpose, and the legacy she would carry forward. Years of strife, injustice, betrayal, and healing culminated here at the roots of her lineage. She closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling slowly, embracing the fullness of her transformation. No longer was she defined by the wounds inflicted by prejudice. Instead, she was a testament to the unbreakable human spirit, resilient and unyielding. A faint smile touched her lips, whispering of hope renewed and the promise of a future shaped by her own hands. The struggles and sacrifices, her own and those of her ancestors, had carved her into a symbol of courage, unity, and lasting change. The broken chains of oppression now lay shattered in her heart, replaced by the steady beat of liberation. Her gaze lifted toward the horizon, where the last light kissed the earth, bathing everything in a golden glow. There was peace, Hurrian, echoing silence that spoke louder than any words ever could, a silence filled with forgiveness, understanding, and the quiet acceptance of what was and what would be. The camera slowly moved away, capturing her silhouette framed against the amber sky, a luminous figure of hope standing on the threshold of a new dawn, a testament to the enduring truth that love and justice, when rooted deep within, can transcend darkness and ignite the light of a better tomorrow. The evening settled softly over the quiet town, a gentle canvas of muted gold and lavender stretching beyond the horizon. Jada Miller, now transformed into a figure of serene confidence, stood atop the hill overlooking her neighborhood, the horizon's glow bathing her in an almost sacred light. Her face, once etched with fear and doubt, now bore the calm of someone who had embraced her truth, a truth forged through fire and fortified by resilience. She gently placed her mother's heirloom, a tarnished yet shining chain, around her neck, the pendant catching the light like a beacon of legacy and hope. The mirror she carried in her mind reflected an unbreakable spirit, a young woman who had reclaimed her voice and her story. Each scar, each tear, now woven into the fabric of her being as a badge of victory. The cool breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of absolute peace, and unspoken acknowledgement that the journey was no longer about fighting against shadows but about illuminating her own path. Her eyes drifted over the still waters of the river below, a mirror to her awakening, still yet moving, steady yet full of unspoken stories. On her lips, a soft smile emerged, the kind that transcended words, a silent ode to her ancestors and to herself. The broken chains from her past lay buried beneath her feet, their echoes fading into the annals of her history. Her shoulders relaxed, no longer burdened by the weight of injustice but uplifted by the promise of tomorrow. The sky darkened gently, stars flickering into existence like distant guides. In their distant brilliance, she saw the shadows of her struggles dissolve, replaced by the luminous glow of hope, faint but persistent. Her silhouette became a symbol, a beacon standing tall amidst the tranquil silence, embodying the triumph of spirit over adversity. The camera slowly withdrew, capturing her peaceful figure against the vast, infinite tapestry of night. The scene lingered, a moment frozen in time, a silent celebration of victory, healing, and unwavering purpose. The world was silent, yet full of meaning, a perfect seal on a journey from darkness to light, from silence to song, from pain to purpose. How would discovering a royal lineage change your life? Share your thoughts below.